So now that we have the logistics of this customer, now that I brought you through the T-bar presentation, we're going to take and do some role playing. This role playing will consist of a very effective technique that I've used many times called a trap sell. I found out a long time ago it's much easier to sell your product if the customer does the selling for you. So I'm going to take and do a role play here in just a moment with Jim, and we're going to sit down and I'll take you through and show you how you can trap sell a customer right there in the loan closing booth. I'll even show you how to take and solicit your customers on the phone by using this presentation. Being able to throw out there that exciting first 2 minutes worth of stuff to get your customers enticed, to get them into the office and show them the T-bar presentation. So let's do some of that role playing. Now we've got the loan close presentation. This is where you've got that CRLB. They're coming in and you're going to make your presentation of the mortgage. Could be a PHL. Could be just about anything, but you got the customer in the booth. Maybe they were making a payment up front. Now they've been put into the loan closing booth. The first and most important thing that you need to do is bring in a reprint of your application. So before you run in there to close that CRLB loan, reprint that loan application. Once you reprint that loan application, you want to have some kind of approach mechanism to your customer that says, I'm not trying to sell you a loan here. I'm trying to get some information. That's it. And one of the best approaches that I've seen used, if you bring in that application and you get in front of the customer, it goes something like this. Listen, Jim, on your loan, before we get started here, there was a couple of things I forgot to ask you, and I just want to make sure here that I've got them down correctly. First of all, I did have down here that your first mortgage was with Countrywide. What was the percentage rate that that mortgage was at?
8%.
That was 8%. Was that on a 30-year mortgage?
30-year, yeah, 30-year fixed.
Oof. Okay, let's just take that for just a second. I did two things there that were very subtle, and you got to catch it. First of all, I asked him a question, meaning that he believes the approach that I'm having with him is purely and simply to gather some information, not to sell him something. Now, the question I asked him was, what was the percentage of his interest rate on his first mortgage? Now, you could already have that information, and you should on your application. But it would be okay to tell the customer that, or be able to ask the customer one more time what that interest rate is. They're not going to see that is probably having any continuity to your loan closing at all. The next thing I did was, once I asked what that interest rate was, I looked at Jim and I said, is that on a 30-year loan? And you can see the facial expressions. The feeling that you should have during that is, oh my God, is that on a 30-year mortgage? But you can't really say it like that without really pushing the customer off the back of the seat. So you want to say it in your face, in your facial presentations. You want to say, is that on a 30-year mortgage? And Jim responded back,
yes.
Yes, because that's typically what it is, a 30-year mortgage. So now that I have that information, this is how you take and trap sell that customer. So let's take it top to bottom one more time. Jim, before we get started here on our loan closing, I had just a couple of things I didn't have on the app. I know you have your first mortgage with Countrywide, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. What was the interest rate that that first mortgage was at?
8%.
Okay, that was 8%. Was that on a 30-year mortgage?
Yeah, 30-year fixed.
Whew. Let me ask you a question on your Countrywide mortgage. If your mortgage company, Countrywide, were to take and lower that down for you to 2.37%, if they were to take and lower that interest rate down to 2 or 3% fixed, no gimmicks, they just called you up one day and said, Jim, we want to lower your interest rate down to 3% fixed. Would you take it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
No gimmicks?
No gimmicks?
2.3 or 3%? Sure.
Would you have to think a long time about that?
Not really. I'd want to see it in writing, but I'd take it.
If they could give it to you in writing, you're telling me it wouldn't be a lot of deliberation on your part?
Seems like a no-brainer.
Wouldn't have to bring it by the spouse and think about it for a couple of weeks?
I don't think so.
No. Seems pretty commonsensical, doesn't it?
Sure does.
It's interesting because I thought you'd say that. we have a product here in which I can put together, it's a non-standard loan product, which means that I can show you how to repay that debt so that that would pay out cheaper than a 2.5% fixed 30-year mortgage. Only difference on my loan is, not only is it going to be cheaper than if you were to take and lower that interest rate on yours down to that percent and add in all your other debts, not only is it going to be cheaper than that, but I'm also going to take and pay off that house, pay off your mortgage, all of your debts in 7.5 years. If I could do that for you and show you that in writing, how to make your money work for you, would you be interested in looking at it?
Oh, I'd be real interested in looking at it.
How could you not? So folks, what you got to do here, you've got to get the customer first trapped. And if you heard on that presentation, let's just back up a little bit. How we trapped Jim was, we asked him, on your current mortgage, if they were to take and lower that rate down to whatever the number is that you worked up on your T-bar presentation, maybe it's 4%, maybe it's 5%, I'm not quite sure what that number would be on your T-bar presentation, but if they were to lower it down to that point, would you let him? And his response was,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I didn't stop there. I took it a step further. And I said to him, are you sure you would do that? Are you sure you'd take the time to make that change? Would there be anything that would prevent you from doing it? Would you have to deliberate around it? Would you have to think on it? Would you have to talk to your spouse about it? Would you have to have this long, drawn-out thought process? It's okay to ask as many of those questions as you possibly can ask. And the reason why? Because all you're doing right now is tugging on their commitment. And Jim kept saying, well, yeah, of course. So now that he said he'd do it, now that he said he wouldn't even think about it, now we've trapped our customer. The only other thing you got to do here is transition. And my transition line was with Jim, I told him, well, I thought that's what you'd say. Or you can use another transition line with them, and that transition line could be something to the effect of, you know what, I had a feeling you might say that. Or any other transition line that will bring you from that line into your sales presentation will work here. You know, most of my customers say that. I had a feeling you might say that. Anything of that nature will transition you nicely into your T-sale presentation. This trap sell in the close is hypercritical. So let's just one more time go through this top to bottom all the way to the transition point. So first of all, we walk in, we have our application in hand, we sit down here with Jim. Jim, before we get started here, I had just a couple of questions here I had to input in the application. I noticed you have your first mortgage with Countrywide. What was the interest rate on that?
8%.
Oh, that was 8%. Was that on a 30-year mortgage?
Yes, 30-year fixed.
Whew. Okay. Let me ask you a question. If Countrywide called you up today and said, Jim, you've been a great customer. We'd like to lower that down to 4.5% for you, fixed. Would you let them do that?
Sure.
Would you have to think long and hard about it?
Not too long.
Not too long, right?
Nope.
Wouldn't have to take a couple of weeks off of work and speak to the wife and have a group seance on that?
Not at all.
Not at all. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
It seems it.
Yeah, that's what I thought you'd say. To be honest with you, I have a program, a non-standard mortgage program with our company that teaches customers how to pay out our loans so that they would be cheaper than a 4.5% fixed 30-year mortgage. If I could show you how to do that, and of course there's the transition, would you be interested? You got to get good at this trap selling. Where you can make mistakes on this with the customer, lots of areas where you can make mistakes. The first area is when you come into the loan booth, you come in there and you say to the customer, hey, could I take just a second of your time? And the customer says yes. And you say, I have this program that, and you immediately go into the sales process what that customer will do is build a wall right here between you and the customer as quick as you can snap your fingers. You don't want to do that. You want the customer to be at ease. And that's why we come in, we ask the questions first, so it's very informational, not sales presentation. And once you get that information from the customer, once you've trapped them by saying, well, heavens, yes, I would take and commit to something like that. That's basically what they're saying. That's when you transition with the customer and you gain their commitment by showing our product that does exactly that. If you can make this work in your sales presentations in the loan closing booth, you will sell loan after loan after loan. You got to get good at this. So make this a part of every single loan close from this point forward.